Buccaneers a threat to score points now early in this game. Play after fake dart, though, towards it. Caught, touchdown, Tampa Bay. Godwin scores the first of 2021.
Chris Godwin, I think people are really overrating the injury. But Chris Godwin is the wide receiver one.
Chris Godwin, just incredibly tough, talented, a weapon for the Bucs.
He does it all. Special guy. They can do a lot of different things.
Most likely, you've forgotten the tear Godwin was on before an ACL tear cut his season short in Week 15 of last year. Through the first 14 weeks, Godwin was the 6th best wide receiver in fantasy football. Despite missing the last 3 games of the season and more than likely submarining your fantasy football championship ambitions, he still finished the season 10th in receptions and 4th in red zone targets. He posted more than half his 1,103 yards after the catch, finishing number 13 in receiving yards and number 3 in YAC. According to Next Gen Stats, Godwin's 6.3 yards after catch per reception was top 10 among wide receivers.
You know, looking back, he's a guy who was making big time plays, getting open, making things happen in a way that I didn't honestly even expect.
While everyone is quick to wax poetic about Rob Gronkowski and Tom Brady's relationship, whether it is the franchise record 15 catches in Atlanta last season or the red zone targets, it is clear to everyone watching, Brady's favorite Tampa wide receiver might be the former number 12.
Let's go!
Godwin and Brady put together this rapport that honestly I didn't expect them to. I actually thought Godwin's style of play, I wasn't certain was going to match well with Brady. He runs routes to get open more than he does with precision in a lot of ways, which used to be a killer for Brady when he was in New England. But they figured it out. So when I look back on who Godwin is, what he does, it was looking like a rocket ship.
Ravens are going to have to get a first down. It is 4th down and 1. Now here's the huge decision. Do you bring the punt team on and give Patrick Mahomes the ball and a minute to work with, or do you try to go for it? Lamar Jackson will stay out there with the offense. Jackson sets in the shotgun, takes the snap, runs to the left. He's got a gap. He's got a first down.
That's how you win a football game.
2021.
And he is truly one of the elites, and I think people are about to remember. After a year of injuries, people remember Lamar Jackson's that dude.
The 29 NFL MVP has been a top fantasy football producer since taking over for the elite Joe Flacco in 2018. Last year, we saw more of the same from arguably the best two-way threat in the game today.
He was on pace again for 1,000 yards. He had 700 rushing yards, and he missed like 5-6 games. And he was on pace for some of the highest passing numbers he had. He was still averaging over 20 points per game in the long scheme of last year.
So what I like about Lamar Jackson realistically is he's one of, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 quarterbacks that can finish as the overall QB1. And if he does it, he can blow it out of the water. I mean, he is legitimately a cheat code.
Lamar Jackson averages over 900 rushing yards per season. According to Next Gen Stats, Jackson leads all NFL players, not quarterbacks, players in rushing yards over expected since he joined the league, with almost a 40% lead over second-ranked Derrick Henry. His rushing floor alone makes him one of, if not the premier upside player in the league.
I'm all in Lamar Jackson, and I think he's truly has that 4,000, 1,000 potential that very few quarterbacks are going to have.
I think Lamar Jackson is a top 5 quarterback, but you continuously see him below Joe Burrow, Kyler Murray, and all these guys. I will take Lamar Jackson above a lot of those guys almost any given Sunday.
Running back and finishing as a top 20 points per game for 2021. An absolute steal.
The run play here. The lone back is Elijah Mitchell. Toss right side behind the tight ends. Flags are down. Mitchell into the secondary. Breaks a tackle. Touchdown! San Francisco!
Finding value in fantasy football can be a hell of a drug. The right mid-season ad can be the difference between not making the playoffs and winning your championship. But what happens if you find that gem before the season starts, or in week 1? 2020's emergence of James Robinson and his RB1 finish had every manager looking for this year's fix, and it came from an unlikely source.
We're trying to find the next James Robinson, but we're not looking at Elijah Mitchell.
You like the offense, but you hate the situation because it's such a crowded house.
Mitchell was the 10th running back selected, 194th overall. He was the second running back drafted on his own team, and the 6th running back on the depth chart. He wasn't even the best Elijah on people's draft boards. After week 1, however, he was the top back, and his performance supported his rise on the depth chart.
From week 1 on, every time Mitchell played, it was his backfield by a long shot. It wasn't a 50-50 split, it was probably a 90-10% split. If a running back on the Niners offense is getting 90% of the touches, I want that guy.
The 13th most attempts as a running back with the 8th most rushing yards. Lobo's FFDen put up. He was 4th in the NFL with 29 runs of 10 or more yard rushes. So he's behind Jonathan Taylor, Dalvin Cook. So that's like elite company. So it's really phenomenal what he was able to do.
Louisiana rookie was top 10 in rushing yards and expected fantasy points per game. He finished the year averaging 15 fantasy points per game, leaving many with some regrets.
I really honestly can't remember another situation where that has happened. But basically what Elijah Mitchell did is what I was expecting Trey Sermon to do. And boy, if I had just swapped them in all my preseason ranks, I would have been a much happier camper all season long. But it's really is remarkable what the kind of season he had. The name I had for him here in my notes was league winner, because he just absolutely dominated.
This guy was pretty much Cooper Kupp-esque the last 3 or 4 weeks.
Golf in trouble, section throws downfield, got a man inside the 10 to the 5, end zone, touchdown, Detroit Lions, Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Whether it was patience or being quick to the waiver wire, you were rewarded with the 17th wide receiver off the draft board in the 2021 NFL Draft. Amon-Ra St. Brown was wide receiver 67 through the first 11 weeks of the season. During weeks 12 through 18, however, he was wide receiver 2. What? During that span, he was 2nd in targets and receptions, 3rd in yards, scoring all of his touchdowns in the 6-week span.
Yeah, his end of the season when nobody else was, when pretty much nobody else was available, he came up big time when the lights were shining brightest.
St. Brown's finish has left many with mixed feelings on the cause of his breakout.
I mean, I think it has to be some of each, talent and opportunity.
For St. Brown to create such a quick rapport with a quarterback who he can make some nice throws, but he's limited. I was really impressed by how much of a feel for the game he had when I watched him, how he finds the spots in the zones and how he's able to gain yards after the catch, manipulate defenders and that's stuff that rookies don't usually show.
If it were just talent, I gotta think that he would have commanded more early in the season. The time of year where he went off included TJ Hawkinson being out, and included DeAndre Swift missing a lot of times. So, we're gonna see that's gonna be a good case of like earned targets versus vacated targets. That's where I think you don't want to not count the talent and say it was just opportunity, because maybe it just took something, some player being out or whatever to get him on the field, and then he delivered with the talent that was always there.
Keep this a one-score game. Kamara's the back. They play action. They hit Kamara out of the backfield at the 10-5. He walks into the end zone. Touchdown, New Orleans. That felt like a death blow.
Just a year ago, Alvin Kamara was the top vote getter in the Fantasy 50, finishing the year as RB1 in PPR leagues and scoring a whopping 25 points per game in the process. He also finished the fantasy football playoffs with a flourish, scoring 6 touchdowns in championship week. This year, he wasn't able to sustain that type of dominance, finishing at number 31.
He had productive weeks, but it just wasn't like the year before. And he still was productive. He was on the teams that I had him on, he never, except when he was hurt, he never left my starting lineup, right?
Kamara finished 2021 ranked 10th in PPR. Despite failing to catch at least 80 balls for the first time in his career, he was able to mark a career high for touches thanks to 240 carries. He was top 5 in red zone touches, weighted opportunities, yards per reception, yards per route run, including a 20.2% target share, best for running backs. It was enough to finish 4th among running backs with 18.1 fantasy points per game.
He's the main guy in New Orleans because there's no one else really, you know. 13 games, still had the most touches in his career. He's getting more efficiency out of that mileage. I mean, the proof's in the pudding. I mean, he hadn't necessarily gotten up to like the 70 or 80 catches that he had, but that could be the game aspect. But in terms of his workload, his ability to still be that workhorse, which there's minimal of in the NFL these days, he's still that top 5 running back. And I just can't pick 6 or 7 other position guys to go ahead of him. So, like I said, he's one of those small groupings of guys who can be that bell cow workhorse back. So, not a lot of shock there, especially with the lack of a massive supporting cast around him and some instability in quarterback.
Almost touched him, but Kamara, the ability to plant that foot and make a little jump cut as you're running up the field, not losing any.